Mike, myself, that's 3. Might need to wait a minute.
There's Avery.
All right, that'll bring us to 4 out of 7, so we should be good. Excellent. Recording is started?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to call to order the meeting of the Reinvestment Committee of the Social Equity Council. Do a quick attendance roll call. Andrea Comer, Corey Betts, Avery Gaddis.
Here.
Sabira Gordon, Michael Jefferson.
Here.
Ojala Naeem present, and Paula Robertson.
Present.
Awesome, and welcome to all of our fellow council members that have joined in for the committee meeting. So coming back from last week, Monday's meeting, we had requested an update on the process of engaging with the legislature on the fiscal year 24 budget for reinvestment, as well as the draft of a proposal that we could take to them that outlines process and next steps that we have in place. So the executive director was it Thursday, I believe, Friday had shared out a draft of that document, as well as some notes on the conversation she had with OPM. So I'll hand it over to her to first walk us through the conversation she had with OPM so that we have a clear understanding of what the next steps look like to bring the fiscal year 24 budget to the legislature.
Thank you. Well, it was basically an exchange of email. And so I asked several questions, and I did send their responses to the questions. So they said to submit the plan by mid-April, and that they would share with the legislature, and then the legislature would review the plan and determine the allocation or the approval of the spending.
Okay, so OPM is going to handle the kind of conversation with the legislature in terms of our budget and plan.
Correct.
And then in terms of the content of the plan, just for the record, do you want to just run through sort of what they're looking for?
Sure. Basically, they said that we should, I'm going to just try to open up that email response from OPM. So sorry, I didn't have it open. Okay, so I asked them about the content of the plan, what information should be included, and they said that the plan should include a plan for the reinvestment funds, what the funding is going to be spent on, who, where, how, and how it will be determined. He said a higher level is okay, just must have enough information and specificity for the legislature to understand the intent, the intended beneficiaries, and the geographic reach. And that the plan should be submitted to OPM, who will share it with the relevant leadership at the legislature. And again, the plan should be submitted by mid-April. And then the next steps I asked, and they said that it is the intent that the legislature account for this money and enacted budget and adopt any required legislation.
Any questions on process for the executive director, and then we'll get into the actual plan. Councilman Jefferson.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Madam Executive Director, I'm just a little concerned that we have a middleman here, and that being OPM. I don't want to hear from OPM that the plan is not good and it delays the process in any way, shape, or form. What's our level of involvement to the degree of bringing it before the legislature? Because OPM can tell us anything. No disrespect to OPM, I just have some concerns. I mean, what's our role? We simply hand over our plan to OPM and let OPM speak for us?
That is the process, as I understand it, that we submit it to OPM and they submit it to the leadership.
I mean, so when do you plan on submitting it to OPM? If it's mid-April, then I like to submit it to OPM long before mid-April. If they have some concern, they bring it to this reinvestment committee, and then we can have a discussion about it, because we're not going to go back and forth with OPM on our plan. This is our money for reinvestment purposes. It's not, I don't want OPM to slow us up for, you know, for whatever reason. And I'm not saying it might be an invalid reason or not a legitimate reason, but I'm simply saying I have some concerns about having a middle person involved in this. Who said that was the process? Why can't we go straight to the legislative personnel or leaders that will have oversight regarding this plan?
I believe Christina Diamond from the staff has a response to that, so I will skip over the other hands that were raised just to so that she can address it.
Yes, so Councilman Jefferson, the council does need to approve a reinvestment plan and then send that to OPM. However, there will be a meeting with the appropriation co-chairs and legislative leaders, OTG, and the Social Equity Council. So we will be involved in that process, and we will be speaking directly at that meeting. So there is an opportunity for us in the council to be directly involved in the process.
Thank you for allaying those concerns for me. I appreciate it, Christina. Thank you.
Thank you,
You're
Christina.
welcome.
I wasn't sure we were ready to announce that yet, so. Okay.
Thank you, Councilman Jefferson, and thank you, Christina. Councilwoman Gordon.
Hi, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding this. We are gonna create we're creating the plan. And then OPM so I guess my question is Mark representing us from OPM to appropriations? Or is there someone else who's less familiar with the process and where we are gonna be representing us from OPM? I guess that's question one. Then I have a follow-up question.
Let's take that first. And again, just to recap what Jeannie Ray and Christina shared, it is my understanding, and Jeannie Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but OPM reviews the budget along with the budget narrative, which is here's how we plan to spend it. But we are representing ourselves with the Appropriations Committee at that meeting that Christina mentioned.
Correct, but in an email from OPM, it did say that OPM would be submitting to the appropriate members of the appropriations. Let me just go back to the.
Is it true that for all government or state of Connecticut departments budgets are submitted through OPM?
I don't know about all budgets. I think Mark has to.
Correct. Yeah, correct.
They are. Okay. So this is not a situation where we're being sort of, put aside and being forced to. This is a process for all departments and all budgets for the state of Connecticut. Great.
Yes, support, yes.
Councilwoman Gordon, I hope
I don't
that
think my question
answers-
was answered. From
Okay.
OPM, is Mark representing SEC from OPM? Or I guess, let me ask this question differently. So it's gonna be SEC and it's gonna be OPM and it's gonna be OTG that's gonna be in the meeting.
Correct.
Correct.
Yes, yes.
Okay, my question is, who is representing SEC, who is representing OPM, and who's representing OTG in the meeting with the appropriations chairs? I guess let me ask it pointedly in that way.
Well, I will be there from SEC, representing SEC. I don't know who all is going to be representing from the other agencies. We don't have the firm date and time and all members attending yet.
And based on just sort of where your conversations have been and who you've been communicating with, I don't believe it's going to be Councilman Pelka who's going to be the OPM representative. I believe it was, I don't remember the name, but Jean Ray, I believe you've been communicating with someone else at OPM on this
Yeah.
over the
and-
last year.
Yeah, when communicating with Holly Williams and Megan Green have been my point of contact.
So it'll most likely be one of them from OPM.
Okay, and then my other question is prep. I think there's value to having a meeting with SEC, OTG, and OPM prior to walking into the meeting with the Appropriations Committee, just so everyone can be on the same page. And I also think there's value in figuring out how we're coming up with the plan. I think we have a lot of the components of the plan. It just needs to be a little bit tighter for what's going to go to appropriations. But I really think the budget process, like they're making the budget right now. If this is for the next biennium, right? And we're asking for, so another bit of clarity, this is back to the $50 million that we're asking for community reinvestment, correct? Or is this just the SEC budget for operations?
So what I sent to you on Friday is what OPM has requested of the council to submit to identify how the $20 million is going to be spent in fiscal '24. That's what that plan is about.
And that
And
is
this
the
is for the community
reinvestment dollars. That
That
is
is
separate
the-
from the operating dollars.
Correct. In the
Okay.
email, it states that there is 5.8 in operating and then 20 million approximately expected in reinvestment. So the fund should show about $25.8 million in it.
Okay, so I would recommend that this committee preps with OPM and OTG before walking into that meeting. Everyone doesn't need to be there, but I think you're probably gonna get 15, maybe 20 minutes. I think to make sure that everyone is all on the same page, SEC, OTG, and OPM need to all be aligned on what we're asking for, the why we're asking for it. I think it'll be really important to make sure that there's a united front and everyone understands what the purpose is and there's no division between us. Because I feel like even now, I don't think we're all on the same page about how we're spending the money, why we're spending the way we're spending, why we're spending the money the way we're spending the money. So I just want to make sure that we have full clarity on what that's going to look like moving forward. I'm happy to help prep for that meeting, considering I deal with the approps chairs probably. Mark probably deals with them more than I do, but on a lot of issues. So I'm happy to help prep for that meeting if it's helpful.
Thank you, Councilman Gordon. So I appreciate the request for that meeting. I think it makes sense. So I know we don't have a date for the meeting with the appropriations chairs, but maybe, if today we can approve the sort of recommended draft of how we plan to reinvest in fiscal year 24, we can schedule a meeting with the appropriate designees from OPM, OTG. I think the chair of the council should be there. I don't think that is a public meeting of the council. I think that is a separate meeting, and so we'll have to figure out how to keep it somewhat restricted in the number of council members that are there, just to make sure we're in compliance. But all that said, I agree, and so I would like to request, Ray, if you can schedule that meeting and let us know in the next day or two, seeing as how it's April 3rd and we've got a week before we hit mid-April. If you could see when that meeting can take place and share that with this committee, that would be great.
I will work on that.
Thank you. Additional questions around process before we jump into the actual, what we're bringing forward? Barring none. So the document that the executive director put together is titled Community Reinvestment Plan Outline. Again, it's a 2024 reinvestment plan outline. It highlights a introduction of, building that clarity between what is the non-lapsing account, and kind of bringing some clarity around that for the appropriations committee. It also has a goal of the community reinvestment plan draft. It talks about the information and data collection that we are doing and have an RFP out for currently. It talks about the reinvestment pilot program that was approved at our last meeting and has been, I believe the NOFA has been put out. Is that correct, Jerry?
Yes,
That NOFA
Yep.
is live, and
yes.
so hopefully we've got folks reaching out about that. So
I'd
it
like
does a
to-
good.
Sorry, I'm sorry. I was just going to say I'd like to invite the members to check out the SEC website. The community reinvestment page is live and has both of these, the NOFA and the RFQ on it.
Great. So it does a good job of setting what I'd call the kind of premise of what we've done to date, and how we're handling everything up to fiscal year 23, and then it dives into the reinvestment plan for fiscal year 24. So recognizing that everything prior to the section titled Community Reinvestment FY24 is things that are already done, spoken about, voted on, and moving forward. I'd like to focus our discussion on the section Community Investment Fiscal Year 24 and everything that's underneath that. And based on what I'm seeing, I believe what Executive Director has done is taken sort of 3 pillars, one around workforce development, the second around programmatic support, which includes the areas that we're looking into for our pilot program, and then neighborhood reinvestments. I have some questions and or concerns around certain categories, but I'd like to open it up first to committee members on any reactions on the reinvestment spending priorities for fiscal year 24. No questions or comments means we are good with those areas and okay to move forward with them as part of the plan.
Madam Chairwoman, I think it's a very good start. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. The only thing I want to highlight, because it was brought up to me, and I know Councilwoman Comer was not able to make it today, is it does include the kind of community projects that focus around blight, urban decay, lack of amenities, etc. And I know we felt strongly for the pilot program about not including that. So I would recommend that we think about not including that for our proposal for fiscal year 24 as well. That said, I recognize that we'll have the opportunity to hone in and tweak more, and this is a great place for us to start from.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
Councilman Robertson had his hand up, and then I can come to you if that's okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks. The only other comment I have in terms of each of the pillars is to make sure that we're really clear on measurability in each of the categories. In terms of just crafting whatever data comes between that and keeping a close eye on it.
So to start thinking about how we would measure impact of those
Correct.
areas. And
Correct.
I don't know if that's something we need for the proposal, but I agree that that's something we need for ourselves for when we put out the call for fiscal year 24.
Yeah, whether it's proposal or for ourselves, I think down the road in terms of crafting measurability is going to impact how we move forward from year to year. So we've got to keep a very close eye on that in each of those areas. And we can sit down collectively and come together how or what we're looking for in terms of what to measure, how to measure, and how it will benefit us in the end.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
Councilman
you.
Jefferson.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Gaddis. I think it's a very good start. And I also agree with you, Madam Chair, that in purposes of streamline, I think we should remove that aspect of the plan. as I just don't, and to the chair, Robinson, I agree. We should have some way to measure outcomes, but that could be somewhat difficult in putting in the plan, but we should at least speak to it that in some way, shape, or form. How we do it, I just don't know. I don't have the answer to that. But it
Thank
makes
you,
sense.
Councilman
to me.
Jefferson.
Yeah.
I think putting something in there that indicates that we will be
Yes.
creating metrics to measure impact for these areas as part of what we launch would be helpful. So Executive Director Clay, if we could just add, I don't think it needs to be a long, lengthy session, but a line or two. Councilwoman Gordon.
Thank you. I would echo the sentiment that I don't think we do the blight, like that section, I think is not, I'm not necessarily, I think I'm more interested in seeing like systemic issues. So like access to home ownership and that kind of bucket of how we spend the money, less around like streetscape, cityscape, blight issues. And then, so to also comment on the outcomes, I think one of the things that we'll be able to learn is as we figure out the first part of the NOFA, one of the things that the contract should include with the grant making agencies is reporting. So having each grant that we send out in this first portion of this, in the first, when they are reporting back to us, I think we have to include like some sort of a reporting on how the money was spent. And that will help. I think it's hard to, I think that's the only way to really measure outcome is to look at the reports and see how, like, measure how better, who was better off by how much based on the reporting measures. But I think that's a back end, not necessarily on the front end. So I agree that we should say we're going to collect the information, but I think it's hard to determine what those things are going to be on like the outset of like, I don't think anyone's thinking we're going to give them $1 million with no strings attached. I think it's got to be connected to some level of outcomes. And I think reporting and this committee and whoever else that sits here after us should be looking at the outcomes based on what was reported back to continue to determine how the money should be reinvested for the future.
Thank you. Councilman Shirley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I realize I'm not a member of the committee, but I just like to try to get clarity. Are you saying, the committee saying you want to remove family community projects that address blight, urban decay, lack of reinvestment, lack of amenities? You want to remove that from four? I understand why you want to remove it for three. I mean, for the current one, but for 24, you want to remove it as well?
That is correct. I think the kind of arguments for that have been, there are a lot of other funding opportunities for that, and we really, even for 24, want to make sure we're focusing on the systemic issues. Now, there may be something that has, there may be a program that requires a little bit of support on the facility side or amenity side as part of a broader program. But the way this is written, it is saying we would entertain a proposal for, hey, our community doesn't have a park in a specific area. We want to open up a park. I'm totally making it up. Probably doesn't even make sense, but what we're saying is if there was a need to rent out a park as part of a program so that there's access to that park for the program, great. But we're not going to support the actual infrastructure development or amenity development as part of it.
And okay, it's just that there's so much of that is needed. I just okay, but I mean, I understand your thinking. I think
it is a very slippery slope. I mean, when we think about what's really needed for the community as a whole, there's a lot, right? But I think trying to put on various lenses on it, specifically focusing around things that are, you know, a result of the war on drugs, what we want to think about in terms of systemic changes and being able to build up livelihoods. We need some level of focus, otherwise it's gonna get a lot of scope creep very quickly.
Thanks.
Can I just get clarification, just so I can take this out finally, because I've been kind of asked to leave it in, take it out, leave it in, take it out. So projects that address blight, urban decay, lack of reinvestment, lack of amenities and resources such as food deserts, pathways, streetscapes, public facility, small business development support, and community gardens. Those are the examples. You would like that part taken out?
Correct. So section 3B1,
Okay.
we'd like that part taken out.
All right, and then 3B2, should that remain under community
That should
projects?
remain. Yep, that should remain. And maybe you just make that 3B instead of 3B2. It should
Yep.
be a underlining theme that we're collaborating to avoid duplicative efforts. So I think you remove 3B1 and just make 3B family/people projects.
Okay.
Councilman Robertson, I don't know, your hand keeps going up and down, so I don't know if you want to jump in.
Yeah, no, actually, some of those issues have been covered through the conversation continuing. I was
great.
jumping in, but the point is that when we look at this, we have several programs that deal with businesses, infrastructure, and so I think that when we approach it, it is looking at dispersing funds and reinvestment through actionable items as opposed to infrastructure in terms of the book. So I think that was kind of covered in terms of how we went through and revised the revision in 3B.
Great, thank you. Councilman Gordon?
Yeah, so there's one thing that I'm not sure what bucket this goes under, because I don't think a community garden is necessarily urban blight. And I think about it from the perspective of, and maybe it could fit under like community programs, but for example, reentry programs that work with people who are formerly incarcerated, and a part of the work that they do is also like, you know, growing food in the community. I just want to make sure we're not getting too prescriptive
Yeah.
to not allow like the program, or is like, for example, community school here in Waterbury, like they have or is it Brass, like they have a habitat for fish, right? Like, so it's connected to something else. It's not just about urban blight or decay, but I just want to make sure we're not taking out that piece of it, because I just want to make sure we're broad enough that, for example, the reentry programs and education programs are able to do with the resources what they say fit as best to meet the needs of the community. So I just want to flag that as like someone could ask for the money to do something for a community garden.
Yeah.
That is not just the community garden, because it's connected to something else, right? Like someone
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
getting folks outside in the.
And that was kind of going back to the point I was making to Councilman Shirley is, you know, what we're saying is we're not going to just invest in community gardens, period. But if you can tie it back to one of the areas we've identified or show us the narrative of how this is, you know, tackling some of the challenges we've highlighted up above in section 1, and a community garden is a pathway to that, then great. Like, we're not saying we're not going to do it. But I think listing it out as a specific community project makes it feel like it can happen standalone, which I don't think makes sense. So just kind of looking at the 3 pillars, I recognize that pillar 2, the first section there is family/people support programs. And I'm wondering if we just get rid of section 3 entirely and pull up what's currently section 3B2A, which is projects that instill community and economic empowerment, such as home ownership, entrepreneurship opportunities, leadership training, etc., and bring that up under section 2A1.
Okay, say that again. 3A.
So I'm just I'm trying to figure out how you've sort of separated this out, because I think we can get rid of section 3 entirely
Okay.
and just pull the family/people projects piece up
Mhm.
under section 2. And for the sake of making sure we're clear on the bulleting, it might be helpful where you just, have 2A be families, people support programs, 2B be youth education, recreation, and the arts. And the two sentences prior to that, investing in existing programs that uplift communities, et cetera, is just a descriptor of programmatic support.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I'm happy to take a look at it, Ray, after you've cleaned it up, just to make sure I'm translating correctly. Councilwoman Gordon?
Yep, I'm sorry, I keep talking a lot. But I wanted to also, I know I flagged this a bunch of times. Have we taken a look at how council members will recuse themselves through conflict of interest? And the only reason I keep asking this is, for example, another council member whose name I won't mention, and I sit on a foundation board or community foundation board that is going to be applying for this. I believe like we should think about, should we be recusing ourselves from their applications? What's the process moving? Because this is going to be moving forward really quickly. And I've asked it a bunch of times, and I don't know if we've gotten an answer for how that process is going to be. I'm less worried about the funds going out into the community part of it, because we don't necessarily, like, we're not making those, like, that's like an up or down vote again on a slate. What I'm more worried about right now is this portion is going to be less people, a lot of money. I don't want there to be any perception that I'm voting on something that I'm sitting on the board of. I just want to be clear. I want to figure that out.
Yep, thank you so much for bringing that up again. And we did put the ask to the executive director and her team to structure a review guide that included what we would do in terms of conflict of interest. I don't think I've seen that. I'm not sure if that's underway, but
What,
if we can have that sent over this week for review by this committee, and I would request that if there are questions on it, we have that discussion over email first, so that I'm not scheduling another committee meeting for this week.
We're working on that, and yes, we will get it out.
and I'd like
Okay.
to see, I'd like to be involved in that process and looking at the deadline in terms of when we get that, hopefully sooner than later.
So
Thank you.
let's, if we could, Director Clay, is by like close of business Wednesday, okay? Because I know you guys have been working on it for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Coma's been working on it, so if he has no objection, we can do Wednesday at close of business.
Great.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would just advise committee members to recuse themselves. I think that's the safest thing to do. Just recuse yourself. Don't even get involved in anything that has to do with SEC in the community. Particularly if it comes to voting on a particular project for a particular entity. I just think that's what I plan to do. I'm not getting involved in it. I'm staying far away from it. Then there's no question. Even if it comes back that there is no conflict of interest, optics matter, right? So that's what we have to be concerned about. That's my advice. Folks could do as they choose.
We also, through you, Madam Chair, in the application for the NOFA, we asked each organization to please identify their current board members. So we will be aware of all members who are on boards and Coma's.
Yeah, and I think the conflict could go beyond just board seats too. So again, I think if you guys just outline like, hey, you must recuse yourself if the following criteria are met, just so that board council members are thinking about it, just beyond the board seats as well. I think Councilman Jefferson did a great job of framing it. I don't think it needs to be overly complicated, but it should be written down, consistent, and as part of the review guide.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to point out that there's an official form created by the State Office of Ethics to report the potential conflict of interest. So I'm gonna be sending that form out to the members of the council so that they can identify organization that they belong And they should also follow the process described by the Office of Ethics in the form to reveal those conflict of interest to the state in the interest of transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Gaddis.
Through you, Madam Chairwoman, I just want to flag, I, I think we're being a little extra with this piece of it. It's really not complicated. I'm not filling out a form. I'm going to tell you that right now, so don't send me a form. It's very simple. Just recuse yourself. We operate under Robert's rules. Robert's rules has very detailed measures of how you deal with conflicts of interest. It's really not complicated. But I always feel for some reason when it comes to us, we always go into areas where we start to get overly complicated. So I just want to flag that I'm not filling out a form. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Thank you, Councilman Gaddis. Again, I know we've done some ethics training as well, and we've filled out, I forget the forms are called, but the annual requirement by the
SFI.
state. Yep, so we should be covered. But
Through
again,
you, Madam Chair,
I
just want to point out that ethics form that you're talking about is a different type of situation that's totally applied. It's a different standard. They're talking about, do you actually do business with the state? Does your family benefit from that business? Is very granular and it's at a different level.
Mhm.
What we're doing is not that.
Yep, my point being, we've done a couple of things that cover a understanding of where you might have conflicts of interest. I know we've had trainings on the ethics side of it as well. I remember sitting through one that also pointed out where there would be a conflict of interest. So I just want to make sure, again, as the staff puts together some sort of parameters that, they take that into account. Let's keep it simple. But let's make sure we're spelling out, like, if these things are true, you have a conflict of interest and you should recuse yourself. So we'll leave it to that. Councilman Robertson.
Yeah, I was going to say to the point, which is, as Councilman Jefferson mentioned, yes, recusing would be the easiest, most simplest way, but I think having something written that we have clearly defined that intent, and that it's into the document, I think will make a difference as well. So at least it's written in the document that we've acknowledged that we're aware that we're taking measures on making sure that there are no conflicts of interest.
Thank you. Councilman Gaddis.
Thank you for the second indulgence. I just hope we get to a level or some point where we're not second guessing ourselves all the time. We don't have to run to this office, this person, this body to check to make sure what we do is appropriate. I feel like we have these training wheels and it's very annoying to me. I just want to do business. I'm not here to second guess anybody on this council or second guess myself. I'm here to lead. I already know what it is and I already know how this works. I don't need Kamala to tell me. But every time we do something, someone says that we can't do it or we get boxed in this agency. We can't have a strategic planning meeting. We can't even talk about recusing ourselves without layers and layers. I think it's very silly. I just want to lead, Madam Chairwoman. That's all I want to do. I don't need hand-holding by anyone on this council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilman Gaddis. Any additional questions, comments, or concerns on the document, the Community Reinvestment Plan outline draft? So to recap next steps, we will be taking out the sections discussed, so section 3, and we will be pulling out families, people, projects under section 2. The executive director will update this document, send it out for final approval for us in preparation for the first conversation with OPM, OTG, and SEC, followed by a meeting with all of those parties plus the chairs of the appropriations committees. For the meeting with OTG and OPM, sorry, all these acronyms, I'm going to lose it. The executive director will notify us when that meeting is and make sure to include the chairs of the the council, chairs of all of our committees probably should be there, so long as it's not causing any issues. And then by Wednesday, we'll provide the guidelines for review of the NOFA, including how we're addressing conflict of interest. Anything I missed? Okay. With that, anything for the good of the order, any new business updates or information? Councilman Gaddis, I don't think your hand is still up, right? It's just from before. Okay. Councilman Shirley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question to make sure I understand what the committee has done. So the document you're talking about now, which will go out, that's the template that the grant making people will use when they as they identify the groups that will receive funds? Or
No, the document, which is labeled the Community Reinvestment Plan Outline Draft V5P, dated March 31st, is the document or plan for reinvestment for fiscal year 24 that we will be sharing with OPM and then further with the Appropriations Committee so that we can have the $20 million for reinvestment appropriated for our budget for fiscal year 24.
Okay, and so what will the grant making authorities be basing their?
The NOFA that can be found on the Social Equity Council website that has already been posted.
Okay, all right.
It's the document that we reviewed last week on Monday.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
No problem. Anything else for the good of the order? Thank you all so much for entertaining many of these meetings. I'm hoping we can get into a little bit of a less frequent cadence on these. And we should probably plan to have something for late next week or the week after so that we can get an update on what's coming for the NOFA. If you have any additional questions, you know where to find me. May I get a motion to adjourn? I got a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Happy week ahead.
Thank you. Take care.